Nutrients and micronutrients. As the name implies, the macronutrients are the nutrients that the plants are going to use in larger quantities. So those are probably going to be the nutrients that you would be adding to your growing area. The micronutrients are needed in much smaller quantities. Now, all of these nutrients, both macro and micronutrients, should be available in the soil. As I mentioned in the earlier video, the mycelium and the fungi, they break down things to make them available for the plants. The root systems, the mycelium, are much finer, so they can penetrate deeper into substances to access nutrients and minerals that the plants are not able to. So having a healthy soil environment with microbes and things like that really is what I would say is a better way of farming, because all of these nutrients are in the existing soil. The plant just needs a way to access those nutrients. Your pH level, if it's too high or too low, too alkaline or too acidic, that can make nutrients unavailable to plants. So there's a number of different reasons why your plant might experience nutrient deficiencies, or why you may need to add fertilizers to them. In regards to like the microbial activity and the fungal activity, a lot of our modern practices, such as tilling soil, would definitely disrupt the mycelium network, or the fungal root system network. If you went into a forest, cut down all the trees, and then tilled up the soil, exposing them to the elements, the sun and the wind, over time they would die off, and it would take apart that system that makes these nutrients available to plants. So because of a lot of the areas here in Hawaii have been under heavy agriculture for a long time, those microbial communities have been disrupted, or no longer are existing in certain areas of heavy agriculture. The use of pesticides and herbicides, they are chemicals that kill life. Herbicides, pesticides, killing the microbial activity. So in a lot of areas you do find land that is devoid of this type of life, which is the life that's needed to provide the plants with their nutrients. So because of the fact that we've adopted these modern practices, we have to reintroduce these chemicals, and that's why we've become so familiar, I believe, with purchasing fertilizers and adding them to our growing environments. If we were farming in a forest, it may be that plant would just thrive on its own because of that microbial mycelium connection that would be in place. So, on a fertilizer package, there's 3 numbers there typically. In this case, it's 555. These positions mean something. This first position indicates the amount of nitrogen in this fertilizer. The second position indicates the amount of phosphorus in this fertilizer. And the third indicates how much potassium is in this fertilizer. And they're all equal, hence all-purpose fertilizer. So what do these fertilizers do? Nitrogen is responsible for foliage growth, the growth of leaves primarily. That would be an excellent fertilizer on your leafy greens, your kale, your lettuces that you're going to be harvesting the leaves from. You would want that plant to be able to grow more leaves back. So making sure that it has nitrogen in the soil will ensure that plant has what it needs to continue growing leaves so that you can keep cutting them. Phosphorus is mainly responsible for root growth as well as flower or bloom growth. So If you're growing a root crop such as ginger or olena, turmeric, then you would want to make sure that you have an adequate amount of phosphorus in your soil. And the last position or number of potassium is used primarily for the overall health of the plant. In a previous video, I talked about how the human body requires a certain number of nutrients to keep all of the systems operating properly. And I mentioned how, in that respect, plants are not very different from us. And that's where we start to get into the micronutrients. So those were the three main macronutrients. There are some other nutrients which are in that macro arena, such as calcium, which has to do with cell wall integrity, magnesium, and sulfur. But you don't see those as much as you will see the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the NPK. All of the other micronutrients, they should be available in the soil, but may not be available because of the missing microbial activity or high pH. All of those are responsible for the multiple systems that occur within a plant system or a plant body. And they do have immune systems. So a deficiency of one of those micronutrients could potentially affect the health of a plant. You might have plants that are more susceptible to bugs and wonder why. Your end product, your fruit, might look like a tomato, but it might be really low in the lycopene, which tomatoes are famous for, their healing qualities. So all of these nutrients are really important. The only real way to tell what you have going on in your soil, unless you have been working your soil for a long time, is to have a soil sample done. So if you're really serious and you're getting started and you don't know the history of your soil, a soil sample test, nutrient test would be the best way of going about determining what you should be amending. And I definitely would recommend that for anybody looking to pursue commercial ventures. We've come to a point where we kind of understand that the way that we're doing it now, where we're just tilling up huge fields, planting our crops, spraying pesticides and herbicides and chemical fertilizers, there's some serious problems with that. And you can read all about it. There's been extensive research there. So I'm really just trying to give you an overall picture of what you should be looking out for if you're trying to grow healthy soil, so that you can grow healthy food, so that you can grow a healthy being or ohana. Not all pesticides are bad. Not all herbicides are bad. There are a couple herbicides and pesticides that you can make. One herbicide is made with water, salt, and vinegar. And it's an herbicide that you can spray down on weeds and it will kill the weeds. However, with the salt and the vinegar, if you continually spray the same spot with the solution like that, you will start to get an accumulation of those elements, and that could cause problems in your garden. As far as pests and bugs, I personally have switched from using poisons in the store to using a dish soap water solution, where the dish soap is really good at cutting grease. Someone once told me that the body of insects were made up mostly of oil, or it was oil that held them together. So dish soaps that are really tough on grease and oil work really well for insect sprays, and I've used them on centipedes, spiders, hornets' nests, yellow jacket nests, and it works great. So there's no reason for me to go out and buy these things when I usually have a really good dish soap handy. Dawn dish soap is a real popular dish soap. It works. In my research, I'm not really convinced that there's a lot of natural ingredients in that product, and I don't feel really comfortable spraying a lot of that product around in our environment. So I choose to use more natural products. This is a product that is made with Melaleuca, or the tea tree plant. There's another type of soap out there made by Bronner's, I believe. They make a tea tree or Melaleuca type soap, as well as a peppermint soap. So those would be the types of soaps that I use in my herbicide and pesticide products. So a pesticide recipe would be a soapy solution, something that breaks down oil, and you could spray that on insects that you can visibly see on your plants. If you're looking for something that's more of a deterrent, then you might want to use something that bugs don't really like, and the onion and garlic plants are really good for that. So taking like 16 ounces of water, adding a tablespoon of soap in there, maybe a tablespoon of an oil, and grating up some garlic and onion to get the juice, the pulpy stuff out, mix that all up, and spraying that on your plants. But as long as your plants are getting all of the nutrients that it needs, then you should have a happy plant. It's a sick, stressed plant that the bugs tend to zero in on. So this is one of my mother's tomato plants, and as you can see, it's not doing so well. Something is going on with this plant, and she had asked me to take a look at it to try to figure out what's happening. I see definitely some yellowed leaves that have actually died. To try to figure out what is happening with the plant, it really becomes a troubleshooting process unless you are really knowledgeable about the soil and what sort of soil amendments, fertilizers have been used, the pH level of your soil, the different deficiencies, and you can identify them. So the yellowing of the leaves can be a nitrogen deficiency. It could be a number of different things. One of the things that can happen is if you apply too much of a fertilizer or a nutrient, you can get what they call fertilizer burn. And it looks real similar to this. However, usually when you have a fertilizer burn situation, the new growth, which is up here, will exhibit what is happening down here. The yellowing, the edges of the leaf will be burnt, and we don't have that in this situation, which is a good thing. So you kind of need to gather as much information as you can. And I was talking to my mom, and what she told me is that she had taken a bunch of wood chips from the pile outside of our house, and she had amended the potting soil with those wood chips. Now this potting soil comes with a mycorrhizae, a fungus that would definitely be moving to break down those wood chips. So it's been in this pot for about a month and a half, and that would have been enough time for that mycelium to be activated, the fungus to be activated, and be working on those wood chips. And what could potentially be happening here is what we're seeing is a nitrogen deficiency in this plant, because the fungus or mycelium under the ground is eating up the wood chips, and in that process takes nitrogen from the soil. So that could be the reason for these yellowing of the leaves and a potential nitrogen deficiency. What I would probably do in this scenario is I would treat this plant with a liquid nitrogen fertilizer. After doing that, I would trim these leaves. Because it's a liquid nitrogen fertilizer, it'll be readily absorbed by the plant, and in removing these leaves, I'll be able to see if some of these other healthier leaves start to turn yellow. If they do begin yellowing just like the other ones, then that would indicate to me that that would not be the problem. So there's a lot of information out there, and trying to troubleshoot what's happening to your plant if you don't know that much about your soil can be kind of hit or miss. It can take a little bit of time, but definitely it's worth trying. This plant, thank goodness, is a long-lived plant, unlike lettuce, which would be like a 6-week plant. This can be saved, whereas a lettuce plant, maybe it'd just be better to start over.